Last year in 2025, I was commissioned by Richard Blake, who happily is with us this evening and listening to my diatribe, and I apologise for all my mistakes that he'll probably pick up on. Anyway, here we go. He commissioned me to make a model of the paddle steamer HMS Golden Eagle as she was in World War II. Richard is the son of one of her wartime commanding officers, hence his interest in this particular ship. This paddle steamer was constructed in 1909 by John Brown and Company at Clydebank for the General Steam Navigation Company. In both World Wars, she was taken over by the Admiralty. In the First War as a depot ship, and in the Second as an anti-aircraft auxiliary. You can see her here in the photograph. Between the wars, she plied her trade as an excursion steamer along the River Thames. After the war, she was reinstated as a pleasure steamer, but she only lasted until 1951 when she was broken up. I will give some more detail of Golden Eagle in my next talk in May on making the model and some research into the particular ship Golden Eagle. This talk is more generally about paddle steamers. I have, up until recently, not given these vessels a lot of thought. Some 60 years ago, I took a trip on board the Bristol Queen. I even started making a model of her back then, but I never finished it. This vessel was built in 1946 and she was scrapped in 1968. Some 30 years ago, I went on a trip on the Waverley. She is still sailing, although I believe at the moment she's laid up having repairs and maintenance carried out. I particularly remember seeing the engines of both vessels and finding them extremely interesting. Watching the steam engines in motion and the general openness of the equipment. The first photo, as you can see, shows the Waverley steam plant. The second is a model of the machine of paddle steamer machinery. I don't know who the model maker is, but it's a very fine model, as you can see. So, being asked to make a model of Golden Eagle opened up new research. So now follows a précis of what I've learnt. There are two main types. The side paddlers, that are the subject of this talk, and the stern wheelers, that featured mostly along the Mississippi in the USA. Maybe somebody else could give a talk about those at another time. But do note they're very shallow draft, as you can see in this photograph. Side wheel paddlers had their heydays in the 1800s, 1820 to 1870 in particular. Dozens of them operated by various companies on UK rivers and coasts, and for that matter across the rest of the world, especially those places with inland waters and lakes. Paddle steamers were good in having steam propulsion and shallow draft. Depth was not that great. However, once the screw propeller was invented and refined, it rather usurped paddle propulsion, hence new construction tended to die out. Early paddle wheels had fixed blades, so there is just one moment when each blade works efficiently. That is when it is vertical to the sea. Yes, more blades per paddle could in theory improve performance, but the more blades, the more disturbance to the sea, so rendering too many blades non-efficient. The feathering paddle wheel was designed and implemented. A series of cranks and arms are attached to each blade and centre around a boss offset from the centre of the paddle wheel. This allows each blade to be more upright for longer and so improves performance. You will note one set of cranks are set solid. This is necessary for the rest to operate correctly. Paddle steamers served in both world wars, but World War II more especially. Some 30 or so were taken up and converted to either minesweepers, anti-aircraft auxiliaries, and or troop carriers. With their shallow drafts, they did sterling service in Operation Dynamo, the evacuation of troops from Dunkirk. Some were lost in doing this. Here are a few photos of typical paddle steamers in wartime. The first, as you can see, shows one moving along at some speed. This one shows some of the typical armament and the camouflage used on these vessels. And the third is one fitting out at the General Steam Navigation Company works. Perhaps most paddle steamers were pleasure vessels plying their trade along rivers and the coasts, carrying paying passengers who enjoyed their excursion, so came back. That was one of the keys. The fares they paid earned profits, some of which was invested in further paddlers. This kept their businesses going for the better part of a century. But not all were excursion vessels. Some were ferries, others tugs, others put to other various uses, including delivery of mail, luggage, and other goods. Most of the ferries bridged across rivers, running regular shuttles from one side to the other. There were also seagoing ferries, for example, cross-channel. Some of the ferries were fitted with tracks for trains to run onto, and so take them and their passengers on a continuous journey. Just show you some photos I have here. There are also car ferries that carried passenger cars and goods vans. The tugs operated both privately and for the Admiralty. In this respect, paddle tugs were built and used after the Second World War. A particular class was the directors of the 1950s and 60s. These had diesel-electric machinery, and here you can see them operating one of our carriers. Reverting back to the early paddle steamers, these were coal-fired and had simple low-power steam engines. As time passed, oil-fired water tube boilers were introduced, and the engines were improved, gave better efficiency, and were more powerful. This was in line with advances in steam power throughout the 19th century. Speed increased from a few knots to near 20. Economy was better, increasing lengths of journeys. The change from coal to oil reduced the manpower required, a saving in running costs. So what is the verdict of the paddle steamer? My view is that they were versatile and useful ships. The paddlers were a good form of propulsion until the coming of the screw. There are several books devoted to paddle steamers, and they will add a lot more information to this brief look at these vessels. Here are a couple of the examples of the books, and there are many others as well. There are just now a relative handful of paddle steamers surviving. Most are owned by preservation societies. There is less than a handful operating or being restored in the UK, but there are quite a number worldwide. The Swiss lakes being a very good example. They require donations to keep these historic vessels going, but long may they last. The final shot I'm showing here of a working paddle steamer is on the River Murray in Australia. And this is a wood-burning paddler. She is the last of her kind. I hope you've liked this brief insight into this subject. As an appetite whetter for my talk in May, here are a couple of views of the nearly completed model I have been making of Golden Eagle. Many thanks for your attention. Thank you.